Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll be really brief. Tonight is the second half, or I guess it's the part 2 of 3 of our utility rate discussion. Tonight we have, is it Zachariah or is it, yeah, it is Zach. Zach is here tonight to share with us the information that they've got for the revenue, or I guess Matt is here, so I guess Matt will be doing. They're going to share with you what they found for the revenue side of the utility rates study, what's required. And with that, I'll turn it over to Matt. You're muted, Matt.
Yeah, I got it. Let me share my screen here, and then I'll briefly introduce our project team.
And just for you guys on Zoom, just so you know, I made copies of the presentation, so council has that in front of them as well. So that if they're not looking at the screen, that's why.
Let me open it up here. Great, that should be every screen going here. So good evening. Once again, I'm Matt Hobson with FCS Group. Joining me tonight is John Ghilarducci, our president and principal on this study, as well as Zach Hazel, who is the primary technical consultant for the rate study. As Lance mentioned, this is part 2 of 3 of our engagements with the council to discuss the rate study background, the results, and decision points for the council. We met last month to provide a high-level overview of the framework for the rate study and sort of just planting some seeds of about the content we'll be discussing tonight, actually. In the discussion we had last month, we talked about 3 main steps in a rate study, and they're sequential in nature. The first one is the revenue requirement analysis, which really looks at overall needs for each of the 4 utilities and answers the question, how much revenue is needed? We'll be focusing today's discussion, or rather tonight's discussion, on this first step. We plan on coming back later next month, likely, to tackle the last 2 steps of the rate study. If you all have any questions on the last 2 steps, we'll answer what we can today, but we'd like to focus most of our attention tonight on that first step. So just in terms of background, as we set up the discussion tonight, as a preface, we talked about some key decisions that we'll be proposing to the council for consideration and discussion tonight. I don't think there's a vote scheduled for tonight. It's more of a work session. But these are the types of decisions that oftentimes are made as part of these studies. And so some of those questions we'll be tackling tonight include the timing of future rate adjustments for the utilities, and the types of levels of service that could be achieved under different rate scenarios. So going to keep that in the back of y'all's mind as we go through the presentation. As a quick primer, the city's public utilities include the water, sewer, stormwater, and the street utilities. And these are financially standalone operations separate from the city's general fund. And as such, they're designed, the rates that are assessed to users are designed to fully fund the operations, the ongoing operations, and the capital requirements for each utility. And by doing so, it avoids having these utility services being subsidized by property taxes and other forms of taxation. When cities set rates, that's not the only objective they're oftentimes trying to achieve. Many times, the concepts of cost equity come into play with rates, in that perhaps certain customer groups drive utility costs differently than other groups. And so the other component we'll be looking at next month is a cost of service analysis, which informs those questions of cost equity between groups. Rate studies also help inform decisions on how the timing and level of rate increases, and also when it comes down to the actual rates, making sure they're understandable to our customers, and so that our customers can respond in a way that we hope they do as relates to the usage of those utility services. As a primer as well, our current rates for the four utilities are itemized here in the table on the left. And then a typical monthly single family bill and the percent and the dollar amounts from each of those utilities is itemized in the pie chart to the right. So a little over half of a typical single family residential bill is comprised of the wastewater portion, followed by water, stormwater, then finally streets. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, when we look at rate making, we're primarily concerned with two types of costs. The first are those ongoing recurring operating costs, including staff salaries and benefits, materials, contracts that we may have for those services, and then customer billing and questions. Those costs are typically predictable over time. They may grow with inflation, but they're typically more predictable and constant relative to the other types of costs, which are those capital investments that we make on an annual basis, but they may be volatile over time. They may include replacing existing infrastructure as well as building new investments to respond to growth or regulatory pressures. So the purpose of a revenue requirement is to put all these pieces together to identify what does the revenue needs look like over the next several years, looking at that analysis on an annual basis. We're concerned with making sure that we can pass two types of financial tests. One, that our rates can consistently and sustainably fund all of our operation and capital requirements. And two, that we can meet any financial policy obligations as it relates to financial reserves or any other debt obligations we may have. The essential math is we look at operating and maintenance costs. We add to that any ongoing debt service. We also add capital funding from our rates to support the capital program. Any requirements that may be needed to maintain our financial reserves. And that gives us an overall revenue requirement. We then deduct any non-rate revenue from that calculation. And that last number then becomes the basis for what we want to recover, what we need to recover from rates on an annual basis. So the starting point that we oftentimes look at is the foundation of a rate study, which is the financial policies. And in general, they include the financial reserves, and we'll cover those briefly here. The numbers you'll see today reflect achieving a minimum operating reserve consistent with the city's practice of the equivalent of 60 days of operating and maintenance expenses. The rates you'll see tonight also reflect maintaining a capital reserve for each utility that's designed to meet emergency repairs, if there are cost overruns, and then also just addressing capital needs that may exist that we haven't accounted for yet. And so they differ by utility, with sewer having the largest minimum reserve of $1 million. Rate funded capital refers to annual rate funding that we are using to cash fund the capital program. Best practice includes setting aside money on an annual basis to at least recover the cost of depreciation, and that's the target you'll see in the rates today. And then finally, while not applicable to any existing debt the utilities owe, any future debt, if it is a revenue bond, we are assuming a debt service coverage requirement of meeting debt service times 2. The key assumptions for the operating forecast is we start with a baseline of this year's budget. Customer count growth is based on PSU's population growth estimate of 0.65% annual increases over the forecast. General inflation, we're forecasting a somewhat higher clip next year, but then growing more to long-term average conditions each year thereafter. And those assumptions apply to both general expense, labor, and benefits. Big picture over the next several years, 2023 to 2029, operating expenses we're forecasting just about 3% per year. So with that foundation in place, we're going to go through each utility. We're going to spend a little more time on the water side, just to get the types of information we'll be conveying to you all in detail. The flow of information will be the same for the sewer utility, for the street utility, and also for the surface stormwater utility. What we'll be talking about for each utility is the obligations, the capital program obligations, a financial forecast for each utility, and then a discussion on fund balances and the predicted rate increases required to meet those targets. So for the water capital program, we're looking at $6.4 million in capital projects over the next several years, averaging just under $1 million per year. To support that capital program and to support operating expenses, we are forecasting some revenue increases. The purpose of this chart, there's several purposes. I'm going to break this chart down, and then you'll see this same layout in future slides. The columns in the chart represent different types of expenses. So the largest column, the one on the very bottom, represents our cash operating expenses, those day-to-day expenses that we incur for benefits and salaries and materials. The next column represents any existing debt service that we have to pay over time. And then the gold column represents cash or rate-funded capital. And so this is funding that we are setting aside to support the capital program, in addition to meeting our operating expenses. You can see that today, the horizontal solid line that runs across the chart is our revenue forecast, assuming we don't make any rate changes from today's rates. And so you can see out the gate that beginning in 2023, our rate revenues cover our operating expenses, our existing debt service, and our rate-funded capital. But as we move out into the future, cost inflation starts to absorb that revenue base, so that by the end of 2029, we're not setting aside enough funding to meet our capital obligations. We are meeting operating and debt service, but we don't have enough cash to support the capital program. The revenue schedule that's being identified here is a 9.75% revenue increase each year from 2024 to 2027, followed by 2% increases each in the next 2 years.
Matt, can I interrupt you? It sounds like there's a question that might need to be asked by a counselor. Is that?
Thank you. Can you go back to the water capital program averages? I apologize if you already went over this, but are these projects that we are planning to do? This is the average of what we're planning to do, the spike in 2026? I just want to know if this is based on what we have planned.
I would say, Matt, this is what the capital plan that we prepared for this utility rate study are things that we believe as a staff need to get done in this city.
Okay.
Not holding steady where we are or we're falling behind. So we looked at it as a holistic approach, as in these are the things that we feel that need to get done to keep this city moving forward. And so this reflects that. That large one at 2026, that's really the sand filter bed that we projected a couple years ago. It's just 2026 it needs to be done. I think I put $1 million in for it.
Okay.
So that's why it's much greater than the other ones.
Thank you for the clarification.
Great. Okay. Now, to those scheduled rate increases, as I mentioned, one goal there is to make sure that we are meeting our cash flow requirements on an annual basis. The other purpose of those revenue increases is to ensure that we're meeting our reserve goals for the utility. And so you'll see a similar chart like this for every utility. It's the ending fund balance projection. The columns represent our projected fund balances each year, and the dotted gray line that runs horizontally across the graph is the minimum target based on those financial policies that the utilities need to hit. So under that 9.75% per year increase that we showed in the previous slide, that scheduled revenue increases would keep our reserves above those minimum targets over the life of the forecast. This table here just shows the scheduled rate increases. I'm going to hold off a bit on these numbers. We have a consolidated schedule towards the end of the presentation that brings everything together. You do have these as a reference if you need to go back and look at the specific charges for this scenario.
Nat, can you give another question, please?
Thank you. The water ending fund balance, the slide you were just on, this is not if we keep it the same, this is if we go with the suggestions?
That's correct. So this fund balance represents funding the capital program as identified in, I'm going to back up 2 slides. So funding this capital program, meeting our operating expenses, and maintaining our fund balances would require that 9.75% increase per year. And this graph represents doing those actions.
Okay. And what do you mean by without new debt? So this would be this would be increasing our rates and not, when would you take on new debt if you were doing capital projects per se?
Yeah. So I should have referenced this earlier in the water. For the water scenarios specifically, we are showing 2 options. One where the capital plan is fully funded by rates, and another scenario that's coming up right in a couple slides that shows if we were to debt finance a portion of the planned capital projects and what impact that would have on our rates and our fund balances.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for catching me on that one. So this is the second scenario for water, and it assumes some new debt, approximately $2 million in general obligation bonds over the lifetime of the forecast to offset some of the cost of the capital program. Most of the capital would still be funded by rates. In this case, though, $2 million of that capital program would be funded by new debt. The new debt is programmed to occur at one issue in 2025, and then a second issue in 2027. The financial advantage of taking on debt from a rate setting perspective is you're simply able to spread that cost of capital over many more years. The downside, of course, is you incur interest expense that you would not incur otherwise if you were to cash fund the program. But under this scenario, if we were to issue $2 million in GO bonds over the life of this forecast, it would lower the projected revenue increases from the 9.75% down to 4% per year. We'd also be able to maintain our fund balances at or above those minimum targets. And I want to remind what you'll see throughout the presentation, all these scenarios achieve those fund balance targets. So we're not proposing or presenting any options that don't achieve those financial policies. And then the corresponding rate schedule under this new debt scenario. Once again, we'll come back at the end to kind of show a high level across all utilities what those rate impacts would be. And so we're going to do a quick stop point here. It's more of a discussion for the council. When we look at setting rates for utilities, sometimes new debt is an option to explore. But we also want to account for the city's priorities as it relates to taking on new debt. Some city councils are a little more averse to taking on new debt because it does restrict that cash flow into the future. Others think it may be a prudent use of their rates to support debt because it does spread that obligation over multiple years. I would say also there's not a right or wrong answer to this question. It's purely a policy choice for councils. And so we have 2 options here. One is that cash funded scenario, which would require 9.75% rate increases per year over a 4-year period. The scenario that requires new debt includes $2 million of GO bonds issued in two packages, one in 25 and one in 27. The upside of the debt scenario is that it lowers your rate increases up front from 9.75 down to 4. The flip side, though, of that choice is that the city would incur approximately $800,000 interest expense over the lifetime of that bond. Once again, taking on new debt, it spreads the cost, but it also restricts future cash to pay for the interest expense. It's a policy choice for council, and we're just trying to present it as a discussion topic for tonight's session.
Mayor Quigley.
Go ahead.
This is Councilor Patty. Thank you for this presentation thus far, and I appreciate you offering yourself up to answer these questions. I just was kind of curious, do you have any other projected scenarios with lower borrowed amounts, say $1 million, and what the rates would look like in that scenario? Or is it just these two scenarios that we're being presented with tonight?
We can certainly follow up with additional scenarios. And so if we want to, if you all would like to see $1 million debt issuance, we can certainly come up with that. And the answer off the cuff, I don't have it on top right now, but it would be somewhere between these two rate increases. But we can certainly provide that scenario.
Mayor Quigley?
Councilor Gilo.
So just want to clarify, I just want to make sure I'm getting this right. So this includes kind of all the cost of living increases as well in terms of inflation. All that number is within these rate adjustments, correct? There's not like anything additional beyond these rate adjustments.
That's correct. Yep. These rate increases, rate adjustments would cover. They're all inclusive. It's one number. There's not an additional rate adjustment that's in addition to these figures.
Last question I have would be: would there be an option that something around like, okay, say if you went the 4 route, if you increased like the last 2 years, like to 4% as well, or to like, is there a lower like total number we could get to, like something like 3.75, if you increase that number out, like the 2% years at the end there?
Yeah, we can explore. I'll have to look at the numbers. What I would expect is that, yes, we have some flexibility in the later years. I'm going to back up a couple of slides here. Some of the pressure on the water utility is the upfront capital that we're looking here, that spike as someone identified. And so this is putting pressure on the rates. We could look at rescheduling that capital. That's really something that we would work with city staff to identify if that's even feasible. And the other option is to take on more debt earlier on. Maybe that helps smooth out the rate increases to that lower 3 3/4%. And these are all very helpful metrics that we can use then to refine these scenarios. But the scenarios we put together here are really for kind of a first go for you all to see. So I'm glad to hear that you all have some other ideas that you'd like us to explore.
Councilor Orr.
Thank you. These geo bonds, do these need to be voted on by the community?
No, these would not require a vote of the people. There are two types of bonds we typically see: a general obligation bond that would support ongoing expenses. The other type of bond that could be explored is a revenue bond tied specifically to the utility, and those also would not require a vote of the people.
Just a quick clarification there. These would technically be full faith and credit bonds. You're right, in the state of Oregon, a GO bond, as most people refer to them, it does require a vote of the people. These would be full faith and credit bonds, which are effectively GO bonds, but you can pledge other revenues to their repayment, in this case, rate revenues.
So is this just?
So these would not require a vote of the people.
Okay,
sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was the easy answer. Yeah, sorry.
Mayor Quigley?
Hold on a second. Councilor McDonald.
Yeah, one question. You have noted there the $800,000 in interest expense. What it seems like a lot. What is the typical repayment term for one of those bonds?
Yeah, the repayment term was based on some of the city's existing notes in GO bonds, and so it's a 15-year schedule. And Zach, you could double check the figures, like the 15 years and then the interest rate that we're assuming for those?
4.25.
4.25. And the 15-year term is correct too, right, Zach?
Yes, for the full faith and credit.
Thank you.
Counselor Gilio.
Yes, Mayor. One question I had was just for the presenters would just be kind of so you're hoping to get some kind of direction in terms of which scenario we want to go in. Is that kind of the idea, is wanting to go, whether we're wanting to go more in the debt scenario or the rate funded scenario? That's correct, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So that would be an opportunity for kind of discussion among the counselors as well. For me, I very much prefer the second option in terms of debt issuances. I think it makes sense from multiple levels because I think it's spreading basically it's spreading out who's actually using these capital projects, right? So the people that will be benefiting from these capital improvements will actually be paying for them later, where as opposed to everything being very fully fronted. I think those 9.75 increases, I think those are a lot for me. So I think something a lot closer to like the 4, or if there's some other options that are maybe a little lower, that would definitely be more the direction I would like to go into. But yeah.
Counselor Ort.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we've been increasing our rates 5% plus, or no, it's 5% plus CPI, right?
Yeah, that's what we've been doing for the last several years.
So how does that factor into, so we are increasing our rates. So this year,
This will take the place of that,
sure.
is my understanding. So this past year, we increased it by 13%, so 5% plus 8 something.
Plus whatever the CPI was,
Yeah.
8.25 or 8%, right?
And so this will actually true it up, and whatever rates we ultimately land on with the rate study would be increased by every year.
Yeah, the rates that our consultant are showing are going to be the rates theoretically that we go forward with if the council approves them. And what we have been doing in the last several years will go all the way. This is one of the reasons we wanted to do this utility rate study, is to
Sure.
try to put us on a path that is good for the city. And there's no speculation of, how much should we be charging, that kind of thing. And so this is good data for you folks to make decisions with.
And I will say, in case you're feeling concerned about having raised it by 5% plus the CPI the past few years, had you not done that, these numbers would be very different. So, I think that those decisions that you made in the past few years helped these numbers not be as astronomical as they might otherwise be.
Gotcha. I guess my question is, how do you predict a straight line if we do nothing when we've actually been raising our rates, even this year, more than 9%?
I see. I think if I understand the question on this chart here specifically.
Yes.
This horizontal line is showing if we held the rates at the 2023 rate levels, as opposed to, there is a line somewhere between these two that shows if we were to continue adopting rate increases tied to CPI, then we'd expect that horizontal line to go up a little bit every year.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So that line is if we did nothing at all.
Yeah, we froze rates.
If we froze it.
2022 funds.
But we don't have frozen rates. Is it possible to get a projection of what that looks like?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
No, I'm just, for myself, so I can work with Matthew on this, I don't completely understand. So what they're showing is frozen rates as of this year. That's what that line going horizontal is. Normally, we would rate, what we have been doing historically for the last several years is raising each fund revenue, their rates, whatever the CPI is. Just so happens to water, we added an additional 5% to
Sure.
try to play catch up. So I guess with Matthew, he could show whatever they could project that CPI in the next 5 years and show you that line. It's going to be probably pretty much parallel to that 4%, somewhere in between there. But it will have a slope to it.
I would just be interested to see what that looks like, because I guess in theory, we're not doing nothing. We did vote to raise the rates every year I'm just curious to see what that looks like. Anybody else?
Mayor Quigley, this is Councilor Patty.
Councilor Patty.
Thank you. So with this one, individually, where I'm sitting is I'd like to see a reduction in the amount where we look at how much debt we are incurring and taking on. Those rate increases, those are hard for this town, especially that we just dropped a 13% on them. I could see those increasing, unfortunately, in favor of a solution where we don't incur debt that's going to ultimately cost us $800,000. So that's where I'm sitting currently. I would like to see some more forecasts. And it sounds like Councilor Ort's onto something too, based on what we've already done, what just increasing these by the CPI would kind of look like. So maybe those two options I'm sort of curious about. I'd like to know more. But that's where I'm sitting individually right now, guys.
Anybody else? Mayor?
Councilor Ort.
I'm kind of in the middle there. I'm just curious to see what that what our actual, maybe closer to our actual, what that looks like. I know you can't necessarily forecast what CPI is going to do because it's been crazy right now.
Let's say 2 years ago, I think it was 3%
Sure.
CPI. And I think previous it was
I think it's about that,
2.8,
right?
2.9. So 3%, anywhere from 2 to 3% has really traditionally been at what it's been. We've exploded into inflation in the last
Yeah.
year. It hasn't gone down that much. But, last year was over 8%. So they show 4% across the board. If you were to follow it, CPI could be greater than that 4%. So those projections could be off.
Yeah.
I think what he's showing is just kind of an assumption of what they see going forward at 4%. But that may change since we do have a resolution in place that says we will be raising our rates through the CPI so we keep up. So the 4% is a projection for us. But then it'll be to council whether or not you want to follow our previous resolution to keep rates with that CPI.
Can I follow up?
Go ahead.
Ms. Mayor, thank you. So I kind of like the idea of if we can lower that increase from what we're doing even now, potentially, but if we could lower that increase and maybe not take on as much debt, maybe find a couple more scenarios, but I like the idea of spreading that out and taking on the debt so that, because the things that we're doing now don't just affect the ratepayers now, they are kind of futuristic improvements as well, and therefore they would benefit from them as well. So I like that idea and not having to put all the burden right now. Now, obviously, we need to do something, so.
Mayor Quigley?
Councilor Giglio.
So I think if it was the isolated rate, like if we were just looking at one isolated rate, I would probably lean towards that decision as well. I think it's more that when I peek ahead and I look at the rate raises across the board, if I look at stormwater, which is a 40% recommendation, and I look at sewer, which is 6% recommendation, I'm looking at what's going to be able to save the current taxpayer, the current resident, as much as we can, like to equitably spread that across the usage of these capital projects. And it doesn't look like these other, a stormwater or sewer have been provided with debt options. So it looks like really the only option that, at least that's provided to us currently, is that where the debt option exists is in the water. So that's where I would lean towards more saying, this is a public good that will be shared by future, residents in this town. And so I think from my vantage, it makes sense to take advantage of that in order to be able to, as we look at these other increases, help them be a little bit less drastic. And I mean, I think just across the board, everything's going up. So if we can curb the amount that we're adding to the residents' bills, I think that makes sense in this situation when there are options.
One thing I just want to point out to council, some of our funds are stronger than others. I just want you to remember that as we're going through this, that when you're going to want to look at the end result and the total utility bill, because that's what everybody looks at, correct? But I'd like you to just be patient when you're going through here and look at the strength of the individual funds. Councilor Giglio mentioned the stormwater fund. It's a very weak fund. We have a lot of work to do in that, and we're spending at $6.45 of a utility bill goes towards stormwater, and we've got millions of dollars of backlog of capital improvements that need to be done. So I just want you to be aware of that as we're going through this. Recognize that each one of these funds is different, and each one of them has different strengths, and just kind of remember that as we're going through it.
So, and I was actually going to suggest in the essence there, in consideration of time, because we don't have a ton of time, and we're just, and I know we're spending more on the water. I would recommend that we move forward because we've got a lot of discussion in the street one as well, and let's push through the other scenario, or the other funds, and then come back, and hopefully we'll have time to get back into this discussion on water and ultimately streets, if that's okay. I know you wanted to pause here and get some direction, but I'm afraid we're going to spend all of our time here and not get to anything else.
Yeah, I agree. Let's move on.
Great. Yeah, so we'll go through wastewater and surface water relatively quickly and then reserve some time for the streets discussion. And then I do want to spend time at the end, as Lance mentioned, bringing it all together so you can see the overall impact to the household bill. So for the sewer utility, there is more capital required, roughly $10 million over the time period, averaging $1.4 million per year. Unlike the water utility, the capital program is a little more balanced over time. The current revenues at the 2023 rate level support existing debt, our operating expenses, and a portion and our rate funded capital. If we were to increase the rates each year 6% per year over the next several years through 2027, it would be sufficient to completely cash fund the capital program, as well as our operating expenses, and to meet our fund reserve levels. This is the projection of our fund balances. Once again, the columns represent the projected fund balance, and the dotted line represents our minimum targets for the fund. This would be another example, as Lance mentioned, this utility is in a fairly strong position. Our operating expenses and debt service are being funded offset by rates, and there's a roughly $1.5 million in available fund balance that we can use to smooth out rates and pay for capital. Once again, this just corresponds to the rate schedule at 6% per year. For stormwater, I do want to remind folks that there's a significant rate increase as a percent. The dollar amounts are also just as important, perhaps more important in terms of the impacts to the overall customer bill. But for stormwater, there's significant capital requirements for a fund at this size, roughly $2.5 million over the time, about $350,000 per year on average. The capital program peak in 2024, having enough cash to offset this cost is the primary driver for the rate increases you're about to see. Right now, our stormwater rates cover our operating expenses, but are not sufficient right now to pay for existing debt service. As a result, we're drawing from the fund balance to pay for those obligations today. The capital program puts significant pressure on future rates, and that to generate enough cash in the next year or so to fund the capital program will require 40% increases. Those adjustments would be sufficient to keep our reserves above the minimum targets. We've seen a corresponding increase. Once again, the current rate is about $6.45. A 40% increase would raise the monthly rate for a single family dwelling by about $2.50 per month, and then another $2.50 per month the following year. for streets. Moving to the street summary, there's a couple things to think about. One, the transportation fee is actually a relatively small component of the revenue that funds this utility. Roughly, the vast majority of the utility revenue for the street utility is from the local and state gas tax. We are predicting a slight decrease in fuel gallon consumption that ties to the revenue for the street utility. And so our transportation maintenance fee is what we're targeting. So the utility fee increase you'll see applied to just the transportation maintenance fee component of this revenue. The other unique pressure on the street utility is the capital projects that would be or can be funded through this rate plan. We'll be showing 6 different scenarios here and looking for direction from council.
Briefly, Matthew, let me just jump in real quick, because most of the council that is before us tonight were at our meeting, I guess it was in the fall, that I brought forward with our street rating report from one of our consultants. These scenarios that he's bringing before you tonight are those scenarios that they also looked at. So you have that report in your records. You can look at those and give you some brief history on it, but these are the 5 scenarios that we asked him to look at. All right. Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah. And for brevity's sake, I'll just briefly summarize the scenarios. So one is just maintain our current budget for capital programs. The second is to fund the scheduled capital projects over the next 6 years. So that's kind of isolated from the street maintenance report. And then the next 4 scenarios are all tied to that street maintenance report. The first one is to maintain the current pavement condition index. The next one is to achieve the 70 level pavement condition index, but do so over the next 6 years. So we won't get the funding immediately. We'll ramp up that funding over a 6-year period. This scenario is actually achieving that funding level in year 1. And then the last scenario is to eliminate all deferred maintenance. The level of capital obligations increase as we move down the list. So this chart here identifies the annual capital cost for each scenario. And so you can see the first area, maintaining our current budget of roughly $3.4 million over the lifetime of the forecast. The next one increases up to $5 million, which is our scheduled capital program. Maintaining our current PCI would require $7.5 million in capital. Ramping up to a 70 PCI is $12.7 million. Achieving the PCI in year 1 is 19, and then the most costly option, limiting all deferred maintenance, is estimated at $35 million. I want to emphasize kind of the key takeaway here is this level here, the lowest level is what's currently being funded through the street utility. So it gives you an idea of the order of magnitude that would be required to achieve these levels of service. The lines here forecast the projected single-family dwelling monthly rate by each of these scenarios. Our current rate is just around $2 per dwelling unit per month. To maintain our capital program, that would need to increase to $11 over the length of the forecast. And the corresponding levels you can see as we move up. The one unique scenario is that ramp up. It's the ramp up to the 70 PCI. We eventually get to that funding level for the achieving the PCI of 70, but we take 6 years to get there. And that's why you see that slope increasing to the point where it reaches that gold line. Those levels, the projected fees in that graph are itemized here in the table, and really want to open up the discussion with council. Our current funding level is option A, which would still require increases over time as we meet the cost increases from inflation and maintain our fund balances. And you can see the changes for each of those scenarios over the several years of the forecast. Speaking with staff, the recommendation from staff is to fund up to that to achieve that 70 PCI, but do so over a phase-in period of the 6-year forecast. We do want to kind of, at this point the mic over here at you all to say kind of what are your thoughts on the level of service that is desired for the city as it relates to streets.
Councilor Patty.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I guess my current thoughts are, it seems like even to maintain, we're going to have to do some significant fees on this. And so looking at this, to get us to where our roads are in good condition, 70 PCI or above, it seems like no matter what, we're going to have to institute some kind of fee. And so I'm just wondering, is there any other way around this?
Is that I'm going to assume that that question is directed at us three. The primary revenue sources for the street fund are the transportation maintenance fee, which only constitutes about 10% of the revenue. The other sources of revenue are the state fuel tax and the local fuel tax. Local fuel tax, the city does have authority to change that rate. By my understanding, it does require voter approval to adjust that rate. But that would be an alternative solution to generate the required funding to meet these scenarios.
So Matthew, to be clear on that, I want everybody to understand this. And I want to make sure I understand what you just said. So of our existing budget, 10% of that budget is paid for through our street fees to our property owners. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
So the rest of it comes from state fuel tax and city fuel tax. Is that correct?
Yeah, the vast majority of the remaining funding are those two sources.
I understood you correctly then. I just wanted to make sure that they were aware of that.
Mayor, quickly.
Councilor Giglio.
Is there a, I'm just looking at this, right? Because, like, for me, having someone's bill at $68 for streets in 5 years, that's like ramping up. I mean, it's just astronomical. It's an astronomical bill. I mean, it's like, it's $600 additional dollars. I mean, it's like one of the, I mean, it's a huge percent. I mean, it's order of magnitude upon one another. I'm not saying that obviously I think it shows that there's obviously serious funding needs for the street. But I also think there's a certain amount of like practicality of like the ability to be able to reach that just in terms of what's palatable and what people can do and what the best way to actually serve people. And then I think you're really at that issue there. So this leads into a question. So I know it's not a preferred method, but are there prohibitions against using other funding? We talked about how, we have, it's primarily funded through the street fund, through the state gas tax and the local gas tax. Are there prohibitions against using general funds, property taxes, things like that? Are those like prohibited to be used towards streets, or are those things that can be drawn upon for periods of time to be able to meet need?
Yeah, so funding sources from the general fund can be used for any lawful purpose. And so if it were the city's decision, yes, you could transfer funding from general fund to other funds. Generally, the other way around is less preferred, and there would be some review that would be required. If you wanted to use utility funds to subsidize general fund, that would be something that likely would not recommend, but certainly the other way around, if you wanted to use general funds to subsidize and or support streets, that is under the purview of the council.
As far as using, correct me if I'm wrong, Matthew, or John, or any of you, and Julia, you may know, I don't believe you can take funds from the sanitary sewer fund and use them for streets. I think there's a law against that.
Yeah.
You can lend that money as long as you show that you're paying it back and you have that loan written down and that you show progress on that loan. We currently do that. But you can't just say, hey, let's use some stormwater funds for streets. That's against the law.
Yes, I understand that. I was mostly just asking about the general fund there, but yeah.
if I can get a sense from council, just because we're going to have to, talk internally and talk with the consultants to move something forward, I guess it would be helpful to know where the bookends of acceptance are for council. I am guessing that option F is probably off the table. And I am guessing, honestly, that option A and B are probably off the table, just based on what I've heard from council, as I started. So I guess I'd like affirmation that kind of where we're at is somewhere between C and D with some finessing. Is that kind of where you're at, or helping give us some direction on what to explore a little bit further?
I have a question
Councilor Ort.
before I answer that. So why is the water fund the only one that we could get financing on? Or is it the only one that we can get financing on?
Yeah, I can speak in general terms. When we look at issuing new debt, one of the things we want to look at is the health of the fund. And so are your cash flows positive so you can support new debt? And I would say generally the water and sewer fund are in better position to incur new debt. The thing we look at is the revenue base and the amount of bond that would be issued. Would that be a large enough amount to attract someone to buy? And John, jump in if you want to add some more detail on some of these other utilities. We generally see, if that's an option, we generally see it used more commonly on the water and sewer side.
It also can relate to the type of capital expenditure. Debt lends itself well to large, infrequent projects, and we're looking at the streets right now. One of the things about streets capital, if you want to call it that, it's really in a gray area, and when we're talking about pavement management, resurfacing streets, arguable that that's even a capital expense. So it really doesn't lend itself well to the use of debt. That's more of an ongoing maintenance cost.
Got it. Thank you. A follow-up, Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
To that end, we've had several people, including myself, talk about some of the roads. I mean, this is why we're here, right? To talk about these roads. But in many of these scenarios that we're talking about, those roads aren't going to be touched. So I can see like a good majority of our community being upset about the rates going up the way that they're going up. So someone paying, at the end of 2029, they're paying $26 a month, and their road is continuing to deteriorate. I could see that being very stressful. So I can't give you an answer really on that at the moment. I'd like to, I would like to take that back and have some more options available than just increasing rates, really in general. But I know it's something that we probably have to do, but I'm not ready to really I'm not satisfied with any of these at the moment.
Yeah, I think, Julia, that this is going to take us another session at the very least, especially for us to decipher which one we really want to target, what's the most pressing need in the community as far as the utility goes. As Councilor Ort said and Councilor Giglio said, it's the total package, the total ramp up, if you will, that we're going to have to be mindful of and the community's going to have to get behind. So it's going to take us a little bit more time, I think, than tonight.
So, yeah, we'll go back and discuss kind of when they're available to schedule another work session that focuses really on the streets, with a little bit of discussion on water and like the full package, and see how that all fits together. Yeah, I think we certainly got some good direction from council that sounds like you guys need a little bit more information.
Mayor Quigley?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think that, I'm not necessarily that far from, making a 1-year commitment, right? So like to ramp up to that first year on the schedule, because none of those, are draconian. They're not, none of those are really, really extreme. But I do think it's going to take a while, I think, to really dive in, not just looking at the street budget, because I think that it's a holistic look at really the budget in general. It seems to be like if we're going to fund roads, if we're going to look at, there's more of a holistic conversation that has to happen that seems even more than a deep dive into one more work session. That's kind of how I see it. But it seems like kind of a conversation we want to have this year, but not one I wouldn't in one more work session be willing to say, it should be 26 or $68 in 5 years. But I think we can maybe start that with an eye towards really having a plan and a holistic look at a conversation, at a budget conversation.
Mayor Quigley.
Go ahead, Councilor Patty.
Julia, I don't know if this is possible, but prior to the next work session, is there a chance that we could get these materials so that we can review them and feel a little more prepared for some of the questions? I feel like, at least tonight, if I had seen this, there's some more stuff I could have looked into and some more questions that I would have had. So just a thought, if that's possible, that'd be great.
Sure, yes, and you have those, and I'll email this to you as well. I will say to Councilor Giglio's point, we are hoping to get this wrapped up prior to the budget so that we can make some assumptions as we go into this budget cycle of what we're going to be doing and what our revenues are going to be. That said, I think certainly one more meeting, at the very least, to discuss this in more detail. And if you're still not comfortable, if there's a general nod of maybe this next year, at least that would get us going if we're not ready to be done in time to do the budgets. But we could talk internally and finesse that through a little bit.
Sounds good. Anybody else before we adjourn?
I have one last
Go ahead,
question,
Lance.
just for everybody's information. So, Zach, what is the CPI West going right now? What is it at?
Give me 1 second, I could look that up.
This is what we'd be proposing anyway, and that's why I want to bring it to your attention. So you guys, when you go back and you look at what they're proposing now, you can see what our proposal would be per our resolution that they approved a few years ago, just so you're aware.
Mayor Quigley, are we out of time? One more
Last one, go ahead.
Yes. So the conversation the other question I would like to have answered would be, what are other local municipalities doing in the county, in the area? Is there any municipality in the area that has a $68 street fee? So just taking a look at that, I think it's going to be really important to take a look at what are other cities doing in the region. And that's a piece of information that's paramount for me.
I think we didn't get far enough, but on slide 40, if you go to slide 40, it compares us to other cities right next to us and where we stand versus other cities. So that might be some information to look at before our next meeting.
And Lance, if I can just reference one additional slide to take a look at, and it's slide 39, which shows the combined single-family monthly bill estimate under these pathways. And so you get a holistic view of our current combined bill for a single-family customer is about $122. And then we show for each of the street options where that would land over the next 6 years. And I do include a dotted line, the very bottom dotted line, which forecasts what the rate would be if we just adjusted by CPI over the length of the next 6 years, assuming the CPI projections we have in the model. I think it provides a little more holistic perspective. You bring everything up and look at the different options. Here's the long-term impact for a single-family residential customer.
And then Lance, as to the CPI, the latest I have is for November 2022, and year over year, that's 7.1%.
Thanks, Zach.
Okay.
So that's, if it remains similar to that, we'd be coming to the city council when we have our utility rates raising in June, we'd be asking for a 7.7 across the board. And we'd show that in our, we had been, I know there was some negotiation in there, but in our budget as well. So just to be aware of that when you're looking at this, that the 4% sounds like a lot, but really, we might be asking for more than that if we were to follow the CPI West. That's all I have.
Thanks, Lance. At this point, I'm going to adjourn this portion of the work session, and we'll start with the city council meeting in just a minute. Can someone grab the lights, please?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for your patience. I'm going to call the city council meeting to order at 7:05. Will you please join me in the flag salute?
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. Today is Tuesday, January 17th, and we will commence the city council meeting. All the members of the council are present, with the exception of the vacant seat, which we will talk about that in the future. Under announcements, is there any additions to the agenda? No? I would like to make an addition to the agenda. And under under Resolution 1050, I want to make sure we add the 2 council seats, council representative to that homeless task force. So if you guys can make note of that, that'd be great.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Giulio, go
I
ahead.
also have 2 more additions to the agenda. I just need to find them, sorry.
Okay.
Right. Yes, I would like to move, I don't know how to do this. I'm still learning the Robert's Rules of Order. But I'd like to move that we would consider city council. So consider council, have a discussion around considering, not city council, but the lawyer council, that, under an executive session, but having a discussion about doing an executive session, just considering that. I would also like to add a motion that considers a committee to review the charter.
Okay, can we put that under item number 10, under communication from mayor and council, please? We'll do that when we get to that.
Thank you.
Yep. Is there any declaration of ex parte contacts, conflict of interest, bias, etc.? I hear none. Means there isn't any. Under appointments, I'd like to start off with appointments. Under Parks and Recreation Board, and the following folks would like to be reappointed to the Parks and Recreation Board: Dan Brummer, Tricia Hafner, and Andrea Klein. And to the Planning Commission, Ralph Lewis, Amy McKenzie Watts, and Larry McKinley. Do I have consensus on that or a motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Ort?
I would like to move that we approve those appointments.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor Patty. I'll second. Briefly, I would like just a quick discussion on something on this.
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. This may be for staff, but there was some information included in Andrea Klein's application for commission. Some talk of purchasing a property. I'm trying to find the specific name, Havarth property. She expresses an intent to see that bought and turned into a park. I was just curious, is staff aware of anything about this property? Is this something that's been discussed prior to in a Parks and Recreation meeting? Just want a little bit more information if it's available. If it's not, that's fine.
Lance?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Patty. I am the city's representative on this board, and each year we try to set goals for our Parks and Recreational Board. That was a Parks and Recreational goal, is to purchase that property for a park. It didn't make our top 3 list, so I didn't realize she put that on there. But it was a goal 2 years ago, or when she started, is to purchase that and make it a park. So that's what that's about.
Okay, cool, thanks. That's sufficient explanation. I feel like I can vote on this. Appreciate it.
Any other discussion? It's been moved and seconded to accept the appointments to the Parks and Recreation Board as well as the Planning Commission. I think on this one, I'm just going to do general consensus. So all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Thank you. Got that, Tammy? We're good? Cool. Okay, this is the opportunity for the public to give public comment. Anybody have public comment that hasn't submitted it yet? If you have, maybe run up there real quick. Oh, Tammy's bringing me one. Thank you. All right, we'll start with Mr. Brummer. Dan, you're up. Looks like just public comment.
There we go. 1, 2, 3. Okay. There've been some questions and confusions about the closing of Wilderness
Dan, can I
Park.
stop you for 1 second? Can you just state your address, please? Can you state your address, please?
525 West Burnett.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I moved there when this was a vacant lot, and my daughter used to graze her horse and sleep right here with the horse. There's been a lot of confusion about the closure of the Wilderness Park. And part of it is that you've got 3 parks all butting together around all the 2 ditches, the 2 main ditches, and there are smaller ones as well. And if you Google Stayton Wilderness Park, you'll get a map saying it's permanently closed. And then you get a lot of pictures of Riverfront Park, which confuses things even more. Sandiam Water Control District is a small subdivision of the state government, and it was established in 1954 under ORS Chapter 553. And it controls the head gates for the ditches and everything. And people ask me, why is Wilderness Park closed? And I can't tell them, even though I'm on the advisory board for the parks. The city should use its website to clarify which park is which, and that there are no private lands in that area. Those are all public lands. Some are under the irrigation district, or excuse me, under the water control district. Some are under the city, and of course the river itself is federal. I would suggest, to clarify things, first thing to do is to put a sign at the end of the bridges leading from Pioneer Park to what was Wilderness Park, saying that the public lands beyond this point have been closed to public use by the Sandiam Water Control District. Better would be a joint statement from that group and this group. And that's really all I have to say. If you want a tour of all those parks in that area, and I won't quiz you now to see if you know which ditch is which, but I've had people on the council that didn't know, so thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Brummer. I was remiss in not mentioning that public comment's limited to 3 minutes. And so if you get the ding ding from Tammy, you'll know what that means. Up next is the birthday. Happy birthday, Pam. Pam Pugsley, it's your chance to come up and give us a shot. And one thing I should remember as Pam's making her way up here, Pam and Dan both were acknowledged at the last council meeting for their endless commitment to volunteer service of the city. So thank you very much in person.
Thank you. I just want to, Dan and I are both on the Parks Board, and
I'm going to stop you for a minute, Pam. Pam lives at 552 North 6th Street.
Thank
Go ahead.
you. I forgot, I told Dan,
okay.
don't forget to say that. Anyway, I walk that park sometimes twice a day, and I get so many people stopping me and questioning, why don't they take this, why does the city of Stayton put up this sign, this wall? Why can't we go back like we always have before? And I explained to them about there's trees that have fallen down, and also that the fact is that it's dangerous and everything, and needs to be cleaned up. But it's still, people just don't understand why. And we thought Dan came up with the idea of putting a sign there saying, I would like to post the Water District's phone number on there saying, you've got any complaints, call the Water District, because I'm sure that the city's getting tired of hearing from people. And also, are we people that want to rent the bridge for a wedding or something? It's really an ugly, ugly sight on the other side of the bridge, And so I just would like you to please consider putting up at least a sign so it would help. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, Katrina, and probably, hopefully I don't misspell it or mispronounce this, Casas?
I think that they're wanting to speak under public comments about the teen center lease.
Okay, just has public, okay, gotcha, sorry, we'll skip that one for the next, both of these, next one will go to that topic. So that's it for actual public comment, for general public comment. With that, we'll move on to consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented. This is
Okay.
Councilor Patty, by the way.
Councilor Patty, if there's a motion to pass.
I'll second.
A motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as accepted. Is there any discussion? We're going to do another one. All those in favor of accepting the consent agenda as presented?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to presentations. Community partner, Julie, you want to introduce?
Yes, our next community partner in front of you guys this evening is our new school superintendent from North Santiam School District, Lee Loving. If you want to come on up, Lee. And I basically told him just to say a little bit about the district and himself. He started about a few days after me, so we're both fairly new to the community, which is kind of a fun connection. So I'll take it away, Lee.
Thank you, Julia. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Council and Mayor, for allowing me to come and speak with you this evening and share a little bit. I'm grateful to be here. Like my friend City Manager, Ms. Julia said, what day did you start?
I think June 15th.
Okay, you got me by 2 weeks.
Oh, 2 weeks.
Officially, but I started working in the district the beginning of May, so actually maybe I've got you by 6 weeks, I don't know. So anyway, grateful to be here. I brought my family with me. We love the area. My sweetheart, who we just celebrated our 26th anniversary, and I've got 5 children, and 3 of them are out of the house, making money or going to college, which is always good. And then I've got a freshman at Stayton High School and a 6th grader at Sublimity School. So we love the area, love the schools. My wife actually, her family's from here. Her grandparents have been here for about the last 60 years. A couple of her uncles are still here and their families. And so she, even her junior year in high school, came over here and stayed with her grandparents and worked in the cannery for a summer. And so we've been coming here for years and years and sought out the opportunity to come to Stayton because it's such a great place to be, and we've always kind of wanted to be here. So anyway, enough about my family and I. Exciting times, the North Santiam School District. Lots of leadership changes. Obviously, a new superintendent. The first 2 weeks I was on the job, we got the opportunity to hire a new director of human services, a new director of business and fiscal services, and a director of nutrition services. So of my 4 directors, I got to hire new ones when I came on board, which is a mixed blessing. Lots of great people and institutional knowledge left us, but we brought some great people in. And it was a great opportunity for us to kind of reestablish ourselves, to kind of figure out our new direction and partner with the city. With Julia coming in. And so one of the fun things is we have started now meeting, our teams are meeting quarterly and kind of catching up and touching base and sharing. And it's been fun so far. And we look forward to that continued relationship. So what I wanted to share with you a little bit about was the kind of present state of the district and how we're doing and where we're going. I don't like talking about the pandemic because that's past and we want to move forward. But a lot of unfinished learning happened with students. Some students had access and really started to accelerate through that time on online learning, but many students did not for lots of different reasons. And so the challenge of coming back the last year and a half, 2 years of really having kids, first of all, in person, and second of all, really working on what that unfinished learning looks like. And so having some kids with some learning loss up to some kids that accelerated. And it was interesting because you may think of the demographic that maybe had accelerated through that time, what that demographic may look like. But it was a little bit unpredictable in that some students that you thought would struggle really accelerated with online learning. And some kids that you thought would accelerate really struggled with online learning. And we knew this beforehand, but it was accentuated even more afterwards was the need not just the want, but the need for really positive relationships with kids. And those kids miss those relationships with their teachers, with the school staff members. And so that's been something that we as a district have really concentrated on, first with Andy and his team as they kind of led out of the pandemic, and then us moving forward this year. That's been a priority for us. Our big theme for the year was bring the joy back to school. And because there was not a lot of joy in school for a couple years. And so that was a focus, it's been a focus for us. So we have focused for years and years and years in education on standards and kids, us teaching students to meet the standard. And that has switched the last few years. The standards haven't changed, but instead of aiming towards the standards, we're really aiming towards skills and what kids can do, and making sure they can perform. And when we do that, when we concentrate on the skills, they are able to meet that standard in a little bit different way. So we're really encouraging students to be innovative, to be creative, to be problem solvers, and we want to put them in a situation to really not only do a lot of thinking, but also some metacognition when they're thinking about their thinking. And what we're seeing is some pretty amazing results. I was in a fourth grade classroom today at Stayton Intermediate School, and they were talking about a math problem. And the teacher had the student go to the board to write their answer on the board, and they couldn't write the answer. They had to write how they got there, and then they had to demonstrate their thinking along the way and the steps. And every other student, all 21 of them in that classroom, were quiet and listening, taking notes on how that student was thinking. And then the student got to reflect, as we were standing there, live and in person, on why they thought that way. And another kid said, I thought kind of similar, but here was my thinking. And he went to the board and started to share his thinking. And so instead of just answering the problem and moving forward, we're finding it really, really beneficial to have kids explain why they're doing things and their thinking. Because one, it helps the teacher realize where maybe those gaps are and where those holes are and where they can fill in. But two, it gives a kid an opportunity to really make those connections that, especially online learning and even pre-pandemic, kids weren't necessarily having the opportunity to do that. So moving from a standards-based system to a skills-based system, even though the standards didn't change, is a really big deal for us, and we've seen lots of great gains from that. We talk about, we don't teach math anymore, we teach kids through math. That's one of the things that we have philosophically, because for us, we believe the best teachers are all about relationships with kids and then leveraging those relationships into great learning outcomes for kids. And so that's really something that I wanted to share with you tonight. The other thing I kind of wanted to share with you was our definition of college in education, especially in the North Sandium School District, has changed recently. Typically, when you say we're gonna have every kid go to college, what often that typically means is a 2-year college, a 4-year college aimed at those places. And what that means in the North Sandium School District is any secondary training. So if they're going to a trade school, if they're going into the military, it also includes 2- and 4-year college, but lots of those pieces are aims for us. And so when we come in and go through elementary school and middle school, there's opportunities to start to think about what those outcomes are. And we're not trying to pigeonhole a kid, but we're trying to open it up saying, look at all these opportunities for kids. Maybe you're really good at something and you maybe think that you don't know where that fits in your college journey. Well, let's go a different way. And so when we say college changes everything, which is one of our kind of themes moving forward, first of all, it does. Second of all, really widen that definition of college so that we can make sure every kid gets what they need to be ready for what they want to go into. And so we're definitely exposing kids to 4-year college, 2-year college, but we're also exposing them to trade schools, military options, really trying to widen that swath of what education after high school means. So I wanted to make sure I shared that with you tonight. Some safety updates for the district. Mr. Gary Reichert and I, how many of you know Gary? Been around for a long time, great individual. Gary and I have been doing safety audits at all the schools. And what we're gonna be doing over the next 4 or 5 months is installing new fencing or fencing, period, if there's not fencing there, at all of our schools to make sure that they're enclosed safety-wise. And we will have, hopefully, functional buzz systems at every school around spring break. So Stayton Elementary has had that for a little while now. We'll be getting that at the middle school, at the high school, and at Sublimity and Mary Lynn. Also, we'll be adding additional cameras, again, just to have secure our campuses. That's a big deal. The one issue that we're having is what to do about the fields behind the middle school. That's a big, open, great area that's used by many, many folks, but everyone that goes there has to go through our campus to get to those trails. And so that's a challenge for us, and we're trying to work through that. So we're definitely going to fence off the front part, so unless you check into the front office, you can't get in the back of the school unless you go down Kendall Way or around, what's that other street? I just forgot off the top of my head. Anyway, that backside on that Polish home, not the Polish home, the Hayden homes. So that's something I'll be talking hopefully with Julia and the team about coming up. Something that I'm trying to do a lot of outreach to the community, and so I'm holding these, what I refer to as Soup with the Soup. And once every 2 months, we're trying to go into different parts of our district and the community and open up opportunities for folks to come in and share with us. Typically, what I like to do is I like to ask them a question and have them then share information with me as the new superintendent. But we're really trying to do a lot of community engagement and outreach so we can really find out how our families are doing and what they're thinking and how we can provide better service to them and their children. So also we're doing a communications audit for our district. So we're having an outside entity called Point North come and do an audit on our communications from buildings to families, our webpage, our other social media presence, and then giving us some, from that they're supposed to be providing us some opportunities to maybe be more effective and efficient in our communications with our families, with our students, with our community members. And so we're looking forward to that audit. That may mean that we get more opportunities in the district to do a little more, like I said, effective and efficient communication, which we're excited about. We're also working with Julia and Chief Johns on the potential of maybe at some point bringing a proposal to this city council in regards to bringing back the school resource officer. That's something that we're pretty excited about. Julia and I and Chief Johns have had quite a few conversations, and we're not quite there yet, but we're getting close to bringing that to you. Chief Johns and I did a presentation to the school board a few months ago in preparation for coming to you and preparation for kind of figuring out what we wanted to do. And the school board, as long as we can work out a few details, is very on board with that relationship and bringing back a school resource officer. So we look forward to those continued conversations. So some of our challenges moving forward, we got Governor Brown's budget, $9.52 billion for education, which seems like a lot and should take care of business, but it's not going to keep our current service levels as we are right now. The schools believe statewide we need about $10.3 billion to continue current services. And that's with a fully funded Measure 98 and fully funded student improvement account. And so there's quite a gap between the 9.52 and the 10.3. And so we're working with our organizations to lobby the legislature for more dollars, as everyone is. The governor's been really clear about her excitement around doing different things with homelessness and the Department of Human Services, and also, providing education. So we look forward to that, figuring that out. So we're trying to figure out and come up with different scenarios of how we can continue to serve kids and families well here in this district with whatever funding we end up receiving. So that's a battle for us the next few months. Also wanted to do a little plug. I saw it was on your agenda, so I'll take a little second to do a plug for the Teen Center. They have been great partners with the district, and we look forward to partnering with them more. We are, this might not be appropriate, but we're hoping that you renew their lease. So just so you know, the district's behind that. And my last piece is, I've been doing a lot of discovery this last 6-7 months, and one of the things questions I have is, what are we going to do with those fields on Kendall Way? Are we going to finish that parking lot? Are we going to burn some lines in there and have some soccer fields out there? So as a school district, we are definitely open to seeing how we can partner to get that thing done, as long as we're not talking finances. But if we're talking other things, we would love to partner and figure that out. I know that I walked that area with my middle school principal here this last week and a half, and what a beautiful area that is. Goodness gracious. And it's pert near ready. I'm sure, you put $1 million in there and you're good to go, right? It's chump change for all of us, right? But we are very interested in, as the city looks at developing those fields and that parking lot, in partnering on that to make sure there's access, maybe some stairs down once we develop a retaining wall down into the fields at the middle school and a gate right there. So we would love to be purposeful and intentional around that to see how we can work together to develop another great community resource. So that's my report. I don't know if it's appropriate, but any questions for me?
Anybody have any questions for Lee? If not, I have a statement for you.
Please.
Number one, I want to thank you for your involvement in the recruitment recently. Last couple of months, you came and you were part of a panel that did some interviews for us. I appreciate your cooperation there. It was awesome. And the last thing I have to put you on the spot is there a certain contest you might be aware of that's taking place right now?
A certain contest?
Yeah.
If I were mayor.
I were mayor or something like that?
Yes, if I were mayor. So first of all, thank you. It was a pleasure to be on that process. Second of all, my principals are working on that. Yes.
I just want to make sure that Julia can elaborate on it, but I just want to make sure all the students know about it and they're working towards that possibility.
Julie sent me the info. I got out the principals. They're working on it.
Awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks,
He
Lee.
needs
Of course,
ideas.
in fact, I was so enthusiastic about it. I also sent it to Sublimity School and Mary Lynn School. So, and then
we
one of the principals
expanded it
said,
and
"I
opened
think
it
it's
up."
just for state residents." Oh, dang it! So I had to redo it. But
Awesome.
Well, and I just, on that note, I want to thank Lee. He has been an awesome and amazing partner. If I ask for a letter of support for our CDBG grant, he wrote it. Just getting that out immediately to the principals was wonderful for the If I Were Mayor. So I really appreciate the partnership that you've shown so far. So thank you.
Thanks, Julia. And the last thing I'll say is thank you for the opportunity to work with Chief Johns. We talk way more than she wants to talk, but she is an amazing person and a great resource for us and a great partner. So thank you. We're so excited to be working with Chief Johns.
Awesome. Thanks, Lee.
Okay, thank you.
That takes us to general business, and under general business, resolution number 1050, which is the appointment of alternates to the homeless task force, and we will let Julia take that.
Yes, and I'll be brief. This probably could have gone under the other appointments. I think I've mentioned when I first started that I'm used to all sorts of appointments and things like that being by resolution, so that's just my mental sort of what I do. So I prepared a resolution, so you've got a resolution in front of you to designate two alternates to the homeless task force. They've both been informed that they have been suggested as alternates, and they both very happily agreed that they would love to if so appointed. So we recommend that you approve the resolution appointing them as alternates.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on those two folks? Nope. What would the council like to do?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Patty.
if there are no questions, I would like to motion that we approve resolution number 1050, appointing Rebecca Kelly and Madeline Tower as alternates to the homelessness task force.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to accept the appointments for the alternates for the homeless task force. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion,
Oh, Mr.
go
Mayor,
ahead.
You had
Councilor
add
Ward.
council members, is that?
I'm going to do that next, yeah.
Okay, okay.
Any other discussion about those two? Having said that, Tammy, can you poll the council on this one?
Counselor Gilio,
Aye. Yes.
Counselor Ort,
Yes.
Counselor Patty,
Yes.
Counselor McDonald.
Yes.
Passes 4-0.
Thank you. Now, adding the addition to the agenda, this is a chance for the two representatives of council to be on this task force, and I will let you all decide between yourselves how that's going to roll out.
Mayor Quigley, I had a couple thoughts about this.
Go ahead.
Over the last couple months, I've gotten to know Councilor Gilio's passion on this issue, and I think that he, for me, is an obvious choice to serve on this task force if he is so willing. I think that the insights that you shared, especially while we're running together, I think you would be of real value on this. To me, you're a given. So I don't know if anybody else has thoughts on that, but when I was looking at this, that was kind of an obvious choice for me.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, and I would be honored to serve on this committee. It's something I am very passionate about.
That leaves one.
And if I may, just, I don't know if I mentioned, it might have been in my weekly report, but we have established the dates for the homeless task force. It's going to be the second Mondays of the month. The first one is going to be February 13th, I believe is the date. So as you're contemplating nominating and accepting, you might want to have that in mind.
Good point. Anybody else? Who's the next person?
Councilor McDonald, are you interested in being on the task force? You're always just so quiet over there. So you can say no. If you're interested, then I'd like to nominate you.
I would gladly volunteer to be on this task force. Thank you.
Thank you all for stepping forward. So Councilor Giglio and Councilor McDonald, there's no need to have a vote since you guys are all governing body people. All right. I plan on attending those meetings, not with much frequency because of the councils there, but from time to time I plan on popping in and seeing how things are going. So that leaves us to the next item of business, Resolution 1051, Ida Street Sewer Improvement Project. And Lance, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. Before you tonight is Resolution 1051, and it is a contract, it is an issue before you whether or not to award a construction contract to Black Pearl Paving excavation for the West Ida Street Sanitary Sewer Replacement Project. Ida Street Sanitary Sewer Replacement was identified as a priority 1 project in our master plan from 2018. I believe Councilor Patty, you sat on that master plan committee, and what came out of that master plan was the sewer line in Ida Street is severely undersized with existing flows, not even future flows, existing flows. So much to the point that according to the models that there should be manholes in First Avenue that surcharge sewer currently during high flow events. And so what we've tried to do in the last year and a half is try to put a contract together, get the sewer line designed, put a contract together and put it out to bid. We did so last July. We didn't get any bidders. No one bid on the project. And so we decided to hold it until December. In December, we put it back together. We put it out to bid. We happened to get 6 bidders this time in December, which is great. And so the lowest bid on there was by Black Pearl Paving and Excavation. They are out of Roseburg, Oregon. We received the bid, reviewed the bids. In the bid process, we required each contractor to show 2 like-sized projects of scope and the amount of work to be done, the scope and so forth. They had 2, we reviewed them. We actually had interviews with the agencies that these projects were done at. They had good comments, good feedback with Black Pearl. And so then we also interviewed the contractor to see what kind of resources he was going to throw at the project, how much manpower he's going to be bringing, how much equipment they own versus they rent. These are typical things that you want to look at for contractors to see if they can do a job or not. I've been in a lot of projects where they rent a lot of their equipment and projects tend to go sideways. These folks own everything. They have plenty of resources to back the project. And so after my staff and our city engineer and I interviewed these folks, we came to the conclusion that we'd recommend this contract go to Black Pearl Paving and Excavation in the amount of $1,768,841.55, of which, and I didn't put this in here, and it escaped me when I was writing this. I was trying to get it done, but $500,000 of that 1.7 million is coming from Marion County from ARPA funds. So the city's obligation will be 1.2 million and some change. So I'll answer any questions that you have regarding this project, and I'll leave it at that.
Does anybody have any questions for Lance?
Mr. Mayor, I have one. And so I was just wondering, what was the budgeted cost for this project? Was there a budget that you had in mind for it going into it, or is just, yeah?
Yeah, so Unfortunately, in the last several years, we've had inflation big time. When they did the master plan 2 years ago, the entire project from the fire station roughly up to Evergreen, up to the Salem ditch, which is about 4,800 linear feet of pipe, was what was proposed to be $2.4 million. Well, that's since doubled. So I would venture a guess it's probably this project itself. When we first put this together, I was proposing $1.2 million, and that was last year. And so now you can see it's gone up considerably, 1.7 million.
Lance, is the current situation impacting future development in any part of town?
Yes, if you go up Ida Street, you get halfway up. In fact, with this first phase, this is a 4 or 5 phase project because of our dollars. What I'm suggesting we do now, or propose to do, I went out and I had it designed. We designed up to an address of 1207 Ida Street. That is just east of where you access the previous North Pack property, the Pacific Northwest Veg property, the big open field back there, the 13 acres. Once this is constructed, as of September 1, I think we put on the bid it was supposed to be done by, that would open that property up to develop. As it sits, we can't let it develop. In fact, we can't let anything develop in this entire sewer basin without real big, hearty conversations whether or not we want to take on the risk.
Okay, and what changed in the 5 months between the bids, going from 0 to 6? Do you know?
Well,
Just
that's,
curious.
my personal thought is it's the economy. I think it goes to a lot of things that we as city staff deal with. We have seen applications come in for jobs much greater than we were in the previous 2 years because of the economy. Jobs are the same way. As a consultant in my previous life, a lot of consultants didn't look at public work at all. But the good ones did because they knew the rainy days were going to come and they wanted to get the public work or they wanted to have their hand in it. A lot of consultants didn't. They just stuck with private work. So these folks, they need work. They can see that perhaps we might have a downturn in the economy and they want to keep their people working. That's my personal take on it.
Thank you. This is the opportunity for public comment on this resolution. Anything? Nope.
Oh, I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll go to council. Go ahead, Council Ort.
Can you remind me where the money for this comes out of?
This will come out of, again, $500,000. We got a Marion County ARPA grant. That will pay for, a third of it. The other will come out of the sewer fund.
Okay.
This project, the key to this project and the problem, the big issue that we found with this project is that it's for existing sewer flows. We can't really, I can only use like 6% of system development charges to pay for this because it's existing flows. And so that has to come out of the sewer fund. I will point out that when we went to Budget Committee, I budgeted $1.46 million for this project as of May, I think, when we met at the Budget Committee. You can see 9 months later, we're at $1.7 million. But this project probably won't get started till April or so, so we'll be using next fiscal year's funds towards this as well to help pay for it.
Council discussion further? Action by the council?
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Councilor
This is Councilor Patty. I have a motion to adopt resolution number 1051 awarding a contract for the construction of the West Ida Street Sanitary Sewer Replacement Project Phase 1 to Black Pearl Paving and Excavation.
I'll second.
Thank you. There's been a motion and a second to award the contract of Black Pearl Paving and Excavation for the contract amount of $1.768,841.55. Further discussion?
I think .55 is a little excessive. I don't know.
You know, contractors, they want that job, they're sharpening that pencil.
There's no further discussion. Tammy, can you please poll the council?
Counselor McDonald?
Yes.
Counselor Patty?
Yes.
Counselor Ort?
Yes.
Counselor Gilio?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That moves us to the next topic that I think most people are here for, and that is renewing the teen center lease. And we will let Julia take it away.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This really is a discussion item, trying to get direction from Council on how to proceed. As is outlined in the issue paper that is in your packet and that you previously received, as well as the staff report, the Teen Center originally was a 3-year lease that expired in 2022, so it has expired. It was the Teen Center is located on the Mill Creek Park property. And originally, when the Teen Center was approved for a lease, it was envisioned that it was going to be a fairly short term because the park was going to be redeveloped. I know that the city we have a master plan for the park, which is also in your issue paper. And we know that some modifications to the park are going to be necessary simply because of the ASR project, the Aquifer Storage Recovery Project that was approved, or that was designed, and then we got some funding for, that will require some modifications, potentially slight, but modifications to the park property because of where the well, I'm not using the words right, but where the equipment and is going to be right in the middle of where the parking lot was going to be. And so we wanted to have the conversation with council. The Teen Center lease has expired. The park has not yet had funding for redevelopment yet, and there are potentially some modifications that are necessary to the site. So there's really two questions that I'm looking for input on, is whether or not you want to entertain renewing the lease for a short period of time or a little bit longer period of time, and whether or not, if you do, you want us to explore modifications to the plan to potentially incorporate that building back into the site. When the park master plan was developed, it was not envisioned to remain on the site, and sort of subsequent or as that plan was being finalized, the Teen Center concept came to fruition. And so when the Teen Center lease was initially put together, it was very clear that that would not remain there, that it would go away when the park was redeveloped. But it's really just an opportunity, if we're going to look at renewing the lease, having that conversation. So that's what I am putting forth to you. And then if you do decide that you do want to renegotiate a lease or have some lease discussions and potentially longer term, incorporating them into the site, then we'll have more discussions about the lease itself at a future date.
Sounds good. I still have 2 public comments pending, if you all don't mind. I'm going to have Katrina come up to start with. And then just while she's walking up, there was a letter from the chamber just supporting the lease extension or the renewal of the lease. So you all should have that in your packet already. Go ahead, Katrina.
Back because I didn't think you guys got enough of me last month, and just in case I forgot anything, and you were not here last month, so I decided that you needed to hear me too. I'm glad that I came on a day that Mr. Loving was here, so you could see that partnership.
Katrina, can I stop you for a minute? Can you give your name and address, please?
Oh, my name's Katrina Casas. I'm the director of the San Am Teen Center. My address is actually Sublimity.
It's okay. We got it.
Let's see. I just wanted to add that I also started at the same time as Lee and Julia. We all started in that little month time frame, so it's kind of funny. We're like the new Stayton area. So I had forgotten to input this letter from the middle school assistant principal. So I thought I'd share it with you guys since I forgot to input it in at an earlier time, and I wanted to make sure when you guys are discussing, you had it. It's something that he sent to us for a grant previously, but I figured it actually predates my time at the Teen Center, so it gives you an idea of the benefit that we've had on the teens and the community. Hello, my name is Matt Olson. I'm the assistant principal at Stayton Intermediate and Middle School. This letter is in support of our local teen center in Stayton, Oregon. In fact, I give my highest possible recommendation to continue funding needed toward the amazing services that is provided to the youth of our community. As a school administrator in our community, I get the fortunate opportunity to hear about all the different ways that this teen center has directly impacted the youth in our small town. Many of our students absolutely love working with the adults there, accessing some tutoring help that is provided, and developing positive relationships with an adult in their life. Others just like to spend time with their friends in a safe and supervised environment. Some of our students are provided some basic needs there. It blows me away when I hear about all the students leaving our school and going to the teen center every day. The reach of this local outreach extends far beyond what the teen center may see or even realize. Our community has a large population of low socioeconomic families, which puts the teen center in an incredible position to have a positive impact on kids in our community that need it the most. This impact provides our future community members with mentors willing to model and lead by example. Programs such as these take a large number of adults with an empathetic heart and commitment to our community. I moved to Stayton, Oregon as a 6-year-old first grader and have been part of this community in some capacity for the last 33 years. To my knowledge, this is the first time during that span of time where there's been a service like this that has been sustainable for our kids. Some incredible people have come together to provide our community with an amazing service that has had an incredibly positive impact on our student community. As you make a decision, please consider the Teen Center in Stayton, Oregon. It has a positive impact on a student population that needs it the most. These students may not get the mentorship, tutoring, or have a positive adult influence without the wonderful people who volunteer their valuable time for this outreach. I couldn't think of a better way to give back, which is why I give the Teen Center my highest possible recommendation. Our community needs things like this in place for our amazing kids. So I just wanted to read that because it gives, some insight to what the Teen Center provides. I love the partnership that we have with the city. I'm gaining a larger understanding of the partnership and trying to grow the partnership with the school districts so we can best support our teens, because Stayton's growing, our whole community is growing. There's not any kind of teen youth center anywhere east of Salem. And if you guys have room, or having a partnership in future long-term lease options for us to be there and be a part of what that park looks like, I think it would be an amazing partnership to have with the city.
Thank you. Denise.
I'm Denise Bush, 1435. Denise Bush, 1435 Highland Drive. And I have been involved with the Teen Center since day one, before day zero, actually. Darcy started coming to chamber, talking about the idea and what they were doing. And so we watched it, all get put together. And so I've been very active as a community member, and then also currently now on the board. And so in the discussions that we've had lately, it just made me think about the park plan and the teen center. And, I just really feel, I really feel you guys, it would be a great benefit when you're looking at this lease to look at it as more of a long-term plan. I think this park could benefit from having the teen center there. I think the teen center could definitely benefit from having the park there. Maybe even looking at a little bit, giving the teen center a little bit more space to expand and just incorporate that plan in with that. We're starting to see the momentum. There has been hours and hours and a lot of, service hours and financial donations, and they're getting grants because they can show the community support. And so I just think it could be a true benefit. I just wanted to show my support for that and kind of coming from both sides. And yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Council discussion.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Giglio.
First, I just want to say, having toured multiple times the Teen Center, I think it is an absolutely invaluable part of our community and serves an incredible purpose. I mean, I think that the work that they do there is phenomenal, and it's really meeting teens at really just such a vulnerable time, and a time to be able to provide that mentorship and that that encouragement that they need in a really fun space. I think is just really, really cool. I'll just kick things off on both of these questions. I would say that for me, there is interest in renewing the lease for the Teen Center. I would also say that for me, there's interest in discussing the possibility of the Teen Center remaining on the property. And what I would say is in its current or alternate location, as I looked at the Mill Creek neighborhood plan, and I was spending more time in that over the weekend. There's one spot, and I'm not sure, that really stood out to me, which was near the skate park. And the reason that part stood out to me is that I know that was actually a little bit of a concern when we had discussions about skate parks, right? Skate parks, obviously, there's the potential for those to not be well supervised and for those to actually start to degrade a park. And so I think it provides us kind of this both and option to be able to provide a place that actually attracts youth, skate park. I know that the kids in my youth group love skate parks and are longing to have one. So it provides that place, which I think is awesome, but then it also provides this place to have accountability, to have kind of some sort of supervision over that park, that skate park. And so I think there's a real option there. That's where I see there being some possibilities as well. And that's where I'll kick that off. I think I will have some more comments as we go along, but I think that's kind of what I just wanted to kick that conversation off.
Councilor Ort.
You just had to look at me, huh? I agree with Councilor Giglio. Especially with the skate park there, like what better place to have behind the middle school, that park, and then to have something as well for kids. Teens. I remember, being a teenager, and there's not a lot for them to do here in this town. And so this really does fill a need, a crucial need as presented to us. And so I'm definitely interested in renewing the lease and keeping it there and putting it into the plan, obviously. We haven't started anything yet, so I'd love to see if we can incorporate that however possible. I did have a question, and I kind of spoke with you briefly, Julia, about that on the promulgation of religious doctrine. I'm just interested why that piece was specifically targeted. It's not illegal to talk about religion, and so I wasn't really sure why this specifically was said that they couldn't. I know that's a faith-based organization.
So obviously, I wasn't here when that was put in there. And I did forward your email to our city attorney as well as some questions from Councilor Giglio. And I wasn't going to get into this because I really want to focus on these questions, but I'll just say that there is probably some opportunities to modify that lease language based on talking with the city attorney.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Quigley, this is Councilor Patty.
Councilor Patty.
First off, all good thoughts. Thank you for sharing. Great idea, David. I am in huge support of this. I think this is the absolute location for this, is next to the skate park in our town. I mean, I can't think of a better opportunity here. Just looking at the site plan here too, I mean, I think that there's opportunity for modification to where we're not, flipping over the table on this plan. I would be in support of it, especially after we've heard from our community partners, the public, and honestly, I would like to see this more of a long-term fixture, what the lease would look like, especially if we can move forward, improving and updating the language in the lease and discussing that at a later date. Thank you.
Anybody else? Ben?
Yeah, I would just echo the support. I'm 100% on board with renewing the lease under the current terms. I don't have any problem with the current terms. think it's a great resource for the town. And definitely the Mill Creek Park master plan, I think, was kind of published and publicized kind of summer and fall of 2019, if I remember correctly. That was right before I came to council, and it was one of those things that I was kind of super stoked about getting going. I was like, I saw this map and there's all this amenities and stuff that we were looking to get, and it looked awesome, and I was excited to see that come to fruition. And so I think I'd be also on board with looking at revising that master plan to include the teen center as it is, or an expansion, but also with kind of a focus on prioritizing those plans too, and seeing what we can do to kind of get that construction in process and get it going. I know we're looking for funds always for everything, but maybe move it up the priority list so that we can see some progress on that.
Thanks. I think, Julie, you and I spoke this afternoon about it. I think we want to make sure we incorporate the Parks Board in this and try to get some kickstart, if you will, and try to see what we need to do to start funding for that park in general, and then this specifically. So looks like you have your direction.
Yes, thank you very much. And just what I'm thinking, just fairly quickly as I'm hearing the consensus, I'll probably start working on a shorter-term contract, just because the contract has expired, or the lease has expired, so I'd like to get them back under lease and make everything legitimate. So I'll probably work on something that's the contract language, while we're also working on potentially having those conversations, those bigger conversations with the Parks Board about incorporating it, and I'm not going to wait for both of them to be done. We'll figure out how to move forward with the lease while we're doing the other.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
So just to clarify, so Julia, those discussions on just the specifics on the lease, on the language that we talked about, but also language on sublet leasing, all that kind of stuff, that's kind of for a later discussion?
That is what I'm going to proceed with, and draft up some, with them and the city attorney, draft up something to bring back to council for consideration.
And then,
I don't know that we need to have another conversation. I mean, we can if you want to, but
Yeah.
I think that based on the advice of the attorney, I think that there will be some term changes anyways. I don't want to, I'm being a little vague, but.
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah, no, I think it's, for me, I see it as just kind of an opportunity to open the usage up as much as we can, so if there are opportunities where there's partnerships that they can have at scheduled times, things like that I'm interested in seeing that, just basically as much as it can be open for usage with kids I think it's great. So
Yes.
that's just generally speaking.
And I have some thoughts on that as well. And so the council will see the draft lease language and authorize it to be signed. And if you need to have more work sessions after you see it, we are more than happy to do that. So.
any more questions for Julia?
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, Councilor Ort.
So something you just said, I was about to say, I wanted to make sure that this space could stay specifically for teens. Obviously, if the teen center wants to, if it's in their lease, if they want to rent it out to other younger children, that's fine, but I would want to see, my vision for it is that that's a place for teens. We have a space, I want to shout out to the library. We do have a teen space at the library, which is awesome. It really is pretty cool that we have that section for them, but a place that is their own is pretty cool. I remember when I was old enough to go to the teen center, that was a pretty big moment. So I just feel like that's important for them to have that space.
Thanks, Councilor Ort. Good? All right. That leaves us with communication from city staff. Julia, take it away.
I don't have a ton. I just wanted to remind the council that, or state affirmatively that we do have a date for our council goal setting. It's March 11th. Specific time and location to be announced, but plan on a full day, probably starting sometime in the morning. And then I also wanted to let the council, as well as the community who's in the audience and/or watching from home, know that Chariot's bus service is looking for citizen advisory committee members. And this was mentioned actually at the San Am Service Integration Team meeting last week, that certainly Salem Kaiser is probably well represented, but the other outlying areas where they provide regional service may not be. And so if there's somebody in the community that's interested, we encourage them to fill out an application. And I don't know if I have any updates from my managers. I didn't get a chance to talk to all of them, but if you have any questions, we are all either here in person. I believe Dan is at home via Zoom, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Council? We're all good? Okay, thanks, Julia. That leads us to the next topic of communications from mayor and council. And I just want to pose a question to council. In previous years, at the first meeting or second meeting of the council, the newly elected council, we assigned committee members, if you will, liaisons to the committees that we have in town. Julie and I had a conversation about why we didn't do that this time, or what we can do to get that restarted. And some of the feedback was that it was time consuming, I think. Maybe the previous council members might have thought it was time consuming. I think it's vital. It really eliminates some of the questions that come up. It gets us all informed about what's taking place in those committees, the objectives of those committees. So I just ask you all to entertain that again. Maybe next meeting, Julia can come back with actually what committees those would be. And if you guys have some time and an interest in what those committee liaisons would be, that'd be encouraging. So that's my 2 cents there. And from that point, council has anything? I think if anything in general, we'll go back to your topics in just a second. But is there anything outside of the 2 topics that Councilor Giglio brought up? Councilor Giglio? Okay, Councilor Ort, go ahead.
I want to know where the Hovarth property is. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's called that. Mr. Sims is back there. He could help me with this. But what I think she is referring to is the property east of the dog park, which is that 6 or 7 acre piece of property there. It used to be the old mill property. Yeah, I think that's what she's referring to. And she thought maybe that would be a good place for a park. I know there's others in the Canyon area and community who think that might be a great thing too. And, if the city had the money for it, that would be wonderful, because that is where we get our water from, is right there. And so we really want to make sure whatever development occurs down in that property, that it's done so correctly. And we look at it with several pairs of glasses, so we don't pollute our water supply, because any kind of pollutant that gets in there, then we're just investing down at the treatment plant to remove that pollutant. So it's very important that we look at that. But that's the property.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Yes, one more thing.
Go ahead, Councilor Ort.
I just wanted to say thank you to the board and commission volunteers that re-upped their place on the boards. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Okay, Councilor Giglio, let's address the topics you brought up earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the first one that I wanted to, I don't know which one I list. Does it order? I don't remember what order I listed them in. The first one is very simple in regards to the lawyer, because I think we would need to have more of an executive session to talk about it. I just wanted to make a motion to have that discussion, to review that, to see if that is if continuing in the same direction or considering another direction may be appropriate. So that's on that first question. That was my intention on that, and so to either bring that into a motion into a next meeting to do that, or to just schedule an executive session where we can have that conversation.
Okay, so what I heard you say is you want to address the city attorney?
Yes.
And the other council?
Can I,
any
I'm
thoughts?
sorry, can I
Go
get
ahead.
clarification
Sure.
on what address the city attorney means?
Sure.
Yes. So what I mean is reevaluate their contract.
Okay.
So to be able to see if we want to continue with current city attorney or we want to reevaluate and go in a different direction with the city attorney.
I want to second that.
Say that again, Council Ort?
I'd like to second
Okay.
that motion.
Anybody else? Councilor Patty? Looked like you're shaking your head. Councilor McDonald, any thoughts?
No thoughts, but I'm open to discussion.
Okay. So it looks like they have direction there, Julia, for that topic. Next one?
Yes, the next topic would be to reevaluate a committee to review the charter. So the reason for this, and I know this is a little bit out of left field, is because as we've been kind of looking at all the things that are coming in here and starting a new term and getting everything kind of off to a fresh start. There's a lot of different areas you want to look at, but I think for me you kind of want to start at the base. You want to start at the governing document, the thing that kind of everything kind of flows out of. There's two areas that I would just like to review specifically, and I think that's section, so Chapter 3 and Chapter 8. So those are just the specific makeup of the council and mayor, just specifically to affirm that that's the model we want to move forward with. And then Chapter 8 would be the second one, would be city management and making sure that that is the direction that we want to continue in, is the current makeup of the current kind of flow chart order that we currently have in there. And so where I would see it is just be to consider if we want to continue in the same model of councilor and mayor, if there might be some tweaks and changes. There are a few ideas I have around that, specifically on, there's a few ideas I think we'd want to consider. And then the second one would be Chapter 8, just continuing to reevaluate that kind of structure of that. Would you guys like more clarity on that, or is there more specifics?
So it would be a charter review panel group on those specific.
So I don't know if we can limit it to specific chapters, but those are the chapters
Those are
I'm
the
most
two that
interested
you're
in
interested- okay.
reviewing. Yeah, and so it would be probably a more holistic review.
Sure.
Yeah.
Julia, or maybe Alyssa, do you recall what prompted us to have the previous charter review committees in 2018? I don't recall off the top of my head. I was on the committee, I should know. I don't recall what prompted us to go that
kind
direction.
of recall, I was on that with you.
Go ahead, Lance.
I believe it was the annexation piece that came down from the state, as well as at the time we were looking at changing from the city manager or the city
That's right.
administrator to the city manager.
That's right.
And so those were the two pieces, but we did do a full charter review at that time.
Right. The annexation piece is still in there, in the charter.
Yeah, our annexation at the point, I think it said anything over 3 acres,
Right.
we take it to the voters, but the state's overruled that, so we don't. do
Yep, I
anything.
recall that was it. So maybe from that standpoint, it might be pertinent. I would like to ask the council to consider that and maybe give us some direction for the next meeting. And Julia, maybe you can do some,
Yeah, I can certainly look into that. My initial gut reaction was this is probably a conversation that's better suited for the
Sure.
goal setting, to kind of discuss
Sure.
holistically what we're going to tackle, because that could alone take up a lot of staffing. But depending on how it's done and organized, but we can certainly come back and have additional conversations. But I think that there's a lot of things that we'll be tackling in this next year. So depending on the scope and magnitude of it, that might take some time.
yep. One last thing that I failed to mention regarding committees, I think we still have some openings. Do you know off the top of your head which planning commission, I believe, maybe? Parks Board?
Yes, they're nodding. Actually, I think planning with the appointments you made today are currently
Okay,
full.
okay.
We do have an applicant for council, and depending on how that appointment goes, there could be a vacancy on planning, but there's currently three, it's currently full. And then there's Parks Board that has one still necessary. and budget has one that is
Yeah.
necessary.
Okay. And the budget one, I want to throw out there to just try to start the process early enough so we don't come to the last moment to try to fill that. So if there's anybody that likes to play with numbers and dive into it and just look at data for endlessly and come see us. And I'm jesting, of course. I want some real input and to be able to contribute to the budget. It's a huge process, as we all know, and the more support on that committee, the better. And then again, the last thing to say: January 31st is the deadline for city council interest. So if anyone out there has an interest to come sit on the council with us, please submit it to City Hall by the 31st. With that, is there anything else? I don't hear anything else, so let's call it a night. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.